Okay, so welcome to the GEM&L webinar series, dear colleagues and friends, and today dedicated to a book presentation by our colleague and friend, Professor Sierk Horn. Thank you for the wonderful audience, and thanks to Madeleine for organizing this webinar from Chile. Let me first briefly introduce GEM&L before moving on to our keynote speaker. GEM&L is an international association of IB and cross-cultural scholars with a focus on language issues in IB and international management. Since 2012, GEM&L organizes an annual international conference on language and management. We also launch 2 times a year this kind of webinar series. This year, the GEM&L conference, will take place in Warsaw, Poland, from 22 to 24 May. And the topic is the future of language in international business management. And next year, the GEM&L conference will be hosted by Vienna University in Austria. If you want to learn more about GEM&L, please visit the GEM&L website. You will find a lot of information about GEM&L there. We will put the internet address in the chat box. Now to our keynote speaker, Professor Horn. Professor Horn has been a passionate GEM&L supporter and contributor to GEM&L conferences for a long time. Thanks, dear Sierk, for accepting our invitation today. Sierk Horn is Professor of Business Communication and Intercultural Competence at Munich University of Applied Sciences. He holds a PhD in Japanese Studies and a habilitation on cross-cultural management from Freie Universität Berlin. His research topics are centered around language and communication in organizations and business education, on resilience of individuals and organizations, and foreign direct investments with a focus on Asia. He has worked in various roles in European and Asian business schools and as an executive in commercial semiotics. He is co-editor of the book Managing Multilingual Workplaces, Methodological, Empirical, and Pedagogic Perspectives, together with me and Susanne Tietze. And is now on the way to publish his new book, Intercultural Leadership, in which he takes, according to the title, Humanistic Perspectives. He will explain that now. We welcome Sierk and are excited to hear about this book that will be published in a few weeks' time, Sierk, or you can announce when it will be published. Thanks to everyone and enjoy this webinar. It's up to you, Sierk.
Thank you, Philip, for this kind introduction. I'm really grateful to GEM&L to give me the space to talk about my book project. And I would also like to thank the audience for the time to be with us today and listen to what I have to say. Why a book? Let's start from there. I haven't been in touch with the GEM&L for quite some time. I didn't attend or didn't have the time to attend the conferences. And that had to do with that I, in a way, opted out of writing papers. I did a lot of publications on that, and I said, well, you know, it was time to do something new. I wanted to spend more time to get more deeper into things than just, you know, writing the paper where I just have maybe 5,000 or 6,000 words available. So this was the game really I was playing for many years, and now I came up with this idea on writing about intercultural management, intercultural leadership. And today, this is what I'm going to talk about, the main features of the book, why I think humanistic perspectives are important, what is leadership, intercultural leadership, and mainly also, you know, talk about the features of the book and how it is set up. But before, let me just, oh, here we are. I think it's important for you to get to know me beyond, the things I'm working on. I'm more than a work person. I'm also a private person. Hence, just a couple of words about me. Yes, I'm Professor of Intercultural Competence or Intercultural Business Communications. I worked on, resilience or shock, how that affected us. I've been doing a lot of work on language, of course. This is what brought me in contact with GEM&L in the first place, with my work also with Nigel Holden, who has been a close, friend of both Philip and myself. And I've been working professionally also for many years in commercial semiotics. So semiotics, looking at, the appeal of visual information. I have two children. They're of course much older than these two on the picture here upper left. I'm a keen fencer. That's what I like. And I also, if I'm in Japan, I try to go over there and also fence with my friends over there. I'm also a keen cook. So here I brought with me a picture of some sushi. I hope some of you enjoy that. So there's a long and strong connection to Asia. And Philip mentioned that also. I graduated actually in a language, modern languages, with a specific focus on Japan, so Japanese studies. This is what I did. I also spent many years in Japan. More recently, I'm into furniture or redecorating or, woodwork, if you will. This is what I'm currently doing. Professionally, I'm not only part of GEM&L, of course, but also I'm more recently been promoted or been asked to take the role of the president or the presidency of the Euro-Asia Management Studies Association. We meet yearly, one time in Asia, one time in Europe, alternating between these two continents and look out, more recent trends in East Asian management studies. So yes, that's basically me, and I think there's much more to say about me than just the mere professional credentials that Philip kindly mentioned. Now to the book. Here I brought with me perhaps a nice picture. Some of you may recognize him. This picture was taken in 2013. Of course, it's Gerd Hofstede. I'm not hoping for halo effects. Yeah, that's not why I brought this picture. I met him at this conference and took this cheesy picture. The reason why I'm showing this is twofold, really. Number one, I think he did great work. I think whatever I have to say in the remainder of today's session, it will be very critical of his work, but I think he's a giant. He did great work for his time. Yeah, I think that is the reason number one. I really want to appreciate his work. Secondly, and this is more the critical part, I think, and this is why I brought this picture from me from 2013, because at this conference in Nagoya, in Japan, he said, and listen to this, just think about it just for a second. He said literally, I'm not interested in people. Okay, just think about it for the second. He is interested in groups. I think this is, a really important message he sent at that conference 10, 11 years ago. He said, basically, many of us are misunderstanding his work. I'm not interested. We try or think we use his work for individual, cultural differences, as it were. But he said, basically, that's not what his work was about. I'm interested in the group, nation, cultural differences, that kind of thing. But we are mistaking his work for, individual differences. And those of us who teach intercultural management, of course, and I will continue to do so, I will refer to his work. But I think we have to be very careful in the way of how we teach it, and also in the way, making sure that the students really understand that we must not misuse his work for looking at individual differences in the sense of, like coursework or that kind of thing, where we try to explain everything through his work. A second caveat of what I would like to talk about today. I'm amazed I'm amazed how, influential school really was for my life. I has visited a so-called Humanistisches Gymnasium, a humanistic school, back in the 1980s, called Lessing Gymnasium in Frankfurt. This is a code of conduct. I don't want to go into much detail about, the humanistic values of this particular school, because I wasn't aware of them when I was at that school. I thought humanistic perspectives or humanistic education was mainly about, classic education, so yes, I had Latin, yes, I had ancient Greek or Old Greek, I had to study that. Music, it was very music-oriented, that school. But I'm amazed how influential this school has been in teaching me values of respect, of tolerating the preferences and opinions of each other, of other individuals, regardless of their gender, nationality, religion, and so forth, and also perhaps also taking responsibility for our actions. And I think this is pretty much describes who I am, and this is perhaps also how I approach other people and how I approach teaching, which eventually has also brought about, the book I have been writing over the last 2 to 3 years. I'm looking at the chat here. If there are any questions, I'm happy to have them during my talk. If there's anything unclear or anything you'd like to add, I think we're going to come to more controversial topics as we move forward. So please do just perhaps you raise your hand, and perhaps Philip, you can monitor who'd like to say something or add something here if that's okay. Anyway, coming back to this talk here, I think this is really, really important. Schooling was really important for me, how I approached the world around me. It was much more. I found out 40 years later, 35 years later, how influential school really was for me, which I have been mistaken for just, the subjects I have been studying. Yeah, just the core ideas, which flow from it away, flow from my educational background. The core ideas it's of course that it is taking a humanistic approach in how I see intercultural leadership. So it's much more about dialogue and self-responsibility. I am still looking for, if somebody can help me, for a good translation into English. Menschen hingewandt, turning, people facing. I'm not sure whether somebody understands what I'm trying to say. I just refer to it to be human-centric, to be appreciative of other people, show respect to other people. That is what I understood, or what I understand about humanistic perspectives. So if we deal as leaders, deal with other people, we should be seeing them as a whole person, being really appreciative of where they are coming from, that they may have a different perspective than us, and be really respectful. And this is much easier than just saying it, more difficult than just saying it. So the book basically then goes on to say that, or sets people not from their cultural background. Yeah, I have a completely different kind of starting point. I'm going to come to that later in that book. I'm not comparing cultures. I'm not interested in cultures per se. I'm interested in people. So if you look at Hofstadter's work and Trompenaar's work, I can compare them to Volkswirtschaftslehre or economics, as it were. But I think, and I'm going to make the point later, we should be moving forward and look at more, Betriebswirtschaftslehre or business studies, looking at the person or the persons who are interacting. So we should look at them from their biographical context, where they come from, how they psychologically respond to intercultural encounters, or culture bumps, as I call them. I'm going to introduce that concept to you later. And of course, their wider social contexts. Yeah, this is, and Philip, you asked me to explain what humanistic perspective means. Well, this is what it means to me. Yeah, to be human-centric, appreciative of others, and be respectful. In terms of leadership, so I'm trying to explain the two parts really of the title of the book here. Yeah, I define leadership as something, a social phenomenon. It emerges from how we see ourselves and others. Has little to do with rank. Yeah, or this is how I set the book up. It is situational. Cultural differences do not matter if I'm not aware of them. So there must be something, some expectation I have about the situation I'm entering that must be unfamiliar, or something I stumble over and say, well, oh, this is different here. Then cultural differences matter. Until then, they don't matter. This is why I call this a situational perspective. They emerge from culture bounds. I stumble over something that is different to my expectations. And here's a link to this group, GEM&L. I think it is a communication or communicative phenomenon. And I talk a lot in this book about communication, of course, because I believe that leadership is communication, as Winston Churchill once mentioned. So it emerges from how we create rapport, true understanding. So the implications of that is that leadership has little to do with rank, power, and control, as I understand it. In intercultural situations, anybody can become a leader. It's not the person on top who's a leader. If I'm particularly eloquent in a specific culture or in a specific language, that makes me a leader in that specific situation. So for me, leadership has little to do with rank. We need to look for the characteristics or attributes of the situation, characteristics of the persons. For me, overall, leadership across cultures is, and I quote here Michael Hess, who is part of the audience, is structured and purposeful interaction. Some thoughts about, does it still matter? I think that's an important question. Is this book important? Well, the answer is, of course, yes, but just stop here for a second. Yeah. Should we still teach intercultural leadership skills to students? Well, there are 5 reasons. I'm going to quickly go over them. Yes, there is the opportunity to work abroad. Yeah, our students will have perhaps an international assignment. They may follow work abroad because they can't find a job at home. They may follow their loved ones. You know, they find the love of their life in Japan. You know, so they find themselves working abroad. Sheila Scott made the point the other day to me that, you know, we don't need to go abroad to interact with people of different cultural backgrounds. We work now in different, you know, in multicultural teams. That is the world of work we do live in. Yeah. Organizations have becoming much more organic and flexible in how they organize work. So multicultural teams are the modus operandi, if you wish, of our current work environment. We find that some of those students work on international projects. You know, I think IB departments or IB international business. It's the new normal that we do work across borders. We might find our students working for foreign firms, and finally, of course, as we do here today, we work in virtual space and we bring together so many different kind of cultures. So is it important? Yes, in a way. Of course it is important, but I do have, over the last couple of years, some serious concerns, you know, about whether intercultural training perhaps had its day. And I think we should ask ourselves this question very, very seriously. With a world being divided, with the world we woke up to 2 years ago with the war in the Ukraine, perhaps there are now, you know, few opportunities for our students to engage across cultures. This idea of, you know, 20 years ago when I was a student, you know, that we should go out and interact with other cultures, you know, our students wake up to a very different kind of environment. Homogenization is a second aspect we should be looking at, of course. You know, there is this American way of life. No, I'm not talking about Coca-Cola and chewing gum, but I'm talking about Amazon and Twitter, or X, as it were, where perhaps there's a huge homogenization amongst the Generation Z or C, I'm not sure how to call them, where there's this kind of nivellation of behaviors and attitudes, regardless of where these teenagers, Gen Z, is coming from. I think there is intercultural management is part of most of business curricula these days. So people who go out can expect that others have been hearing at least about Hofstede and Trompenaar and the Globe study and all that. We all know that there is this kind of high awareness that if we have students go out, that they should be aware that cultures are different. So it's really nothing new. It's normal that we should be watching out for cultural differences. So I'm asking, perhaps intercultural training as we do it, whether it had its day. Are the framework helpful? I'm not sure about that. I think they are far too abstract, looking at the notion of economics and business studies. I compare these old models to economics for well. They're really useful academically, but are they helpful on the ground? I'm not so sure. Well, the trainings are, as it were, are they, up to date? Are we teaching the students what they really need? That could be a matter of discussion, of course. So yes, you have this crying smiley emoji here. Did it have its day? And the answer to me, no, I don't think so. Going back now, presenting to you the idea, I think we need more intercultural training and not less. But I think the traditional approaches of how we teach it is perhaps not enough. And one reason for that is the change of the studentship of students we are facing in the classroom. They have completely new ideas about how they like to be taught. This is a whole different kind of theme, but I think we all know what we're talking about here. We are all professional lecturers, as it were, that they are expecting to be much more involved in the development of the ideas. They do not want to be like this one-way street of being presented with ideas. They would like to make up their own ideas and thoughts about these issues. So I think the new buzzword is experiential learning. Yeah. So to hear is better than not to hear. To see is better than to hear. To know is better than to see and to do. And this is important. It's better than to know. We need our students to do things that they really understand, the things what we're talking about. Yeah. So this is one reason. Students' expectations are changing. If they are changing, we think, or at least I think, we should need to consider about how we present things such as intercultural leadership and intercultural management. And of course, there are good academic reasons to also, reinvigorate the idea of how we teach intercultural leadership or intercultural management. I understand, well, if I saw you here, hi Rolf, from Japan. I brought some pictures with me, and I'm sure we could have a whole debate about that. I don't want to go into that direction, but are these frameworks really, really helpful? These pictures are from Japan. This is from McDonald's on the left-hand side. Individual cubicles where people sit individually to eat. There's no interaction. Is it really? Can we talk about Japan being collectivist country? Certainly not. Is it, a country which is very much reserved? Now, look at this picture I brought from Tokyo. This Mercedes-Benz full of Swarovski kind of, glitter kind of thing. It's very flashy, and it's, for me at least, the opposite of reservedness. Yeah. So I think we need to be careful about how we use these frameworks, but I make this point many, many times now. If I'm moving too fast, please let me know. I think, if you look at, how intercultural management has been taught or is usually being taught most of the time, I call it basic. And I don't mean it in any kind of diminutive kind of way. Yeah. Or intercultural management research as it were. Yeah. If you look at the left-hand side here, I made the point, Hofstede was not interested in individuals, he was interested in groups. Yeah, it's a very mechanistic kind of understanding ethic, ETIC kind of understanding of how people think and work. It's this kind of homo economicus kind of idea of how people think and behave. You know, let's put them into this kind of schablone box, you know, and all Germans are like this, or all Italians are like that. You know, it's very mechanistic and universalistic, you know, so there are these kind of dimensions, you know, we all know them. And if we have them, we can start comparing cultures, you know, scoring high or low. It's very positivist, it's based on large-scale studies, and this is important to me. It captures cultures as sources of differences. We shouldn't perhaps, we should be more careful about this, yeah? Because culture A scores high on uncertainty avoidance and culture B scores low on uncertainty avoidance, there's this automatic assumption that there's a cultural difference, yeah? And overall, I should think that, you know, these frameworks, as it were, are really, really poor predictors of how people actually behave. I think it's much more complicated than just making any kind of prediction based on the cultural frameworks. Let's move on to the right-hand side. I think we should strive for an idea where we look at the individual, hence the humanistic kind of approach. It's much more organic, looking at people in a more, you know, organic, holistic kind of way where they're coming from. You know, we need to look at a you know, one kind of perspective. Instead of talking about positivist, we need to think about, you know, the framework, not the framework, that's not the word I'm looking for, you know, the system, the biography, you know, that kind of thing. We need to look at persons more holistically instead of positivistically. I think the time of having large-scale studies are perhaps over. We need to look at, you know, individuals, what they do when they act with other cultures. And if we have all that, maybe we arrive at much better predictions about how people behave in specific intercultural situations. So I see, and this is important for me, instead of looking at culture as differences, I see culture as a source of building relationships, and hence, again, this idea of humanism, human-centric, respect and appreciation of others. I think cultural differences are, culture is a great source of building relationships. We need to move away from this looking at culture as a source of differences. Some fundamental assumptions for all human beings. So moving now to more stringently to the book, and I'm going to talk about the book in more detail now. So I think that every step we take is preceded by thousands of experiences and tiny factors that are outside our control. Yeah. The cultural difference is just top off of all the things that are going on when we meet other people. Yeah. We just shouldn't just isolate, as it were, cultural differences or, you know, differences between cultures as just one factor. This is just a tiny factor of what is going on if we meet people from different kind of cultures. We have a job, we have a private life, we bring these ideas into the situation, and this is how the interaction pans out. So when we finally find ourselves in intercultural encounters, we cannot help but operate with our inner map, our emotions and cognitions, our emotions and thinking, as it were, and respond to what is happening around us. Yeah. So I strongly zoom into the individualistic kind of factors that might go on if we look at or interact with people with different kind of cultural backgrounds. Yeah. And I think useful as they are, and they are useful, I make the point again, Hofstede's work, he's a giant, but he asked the question for his time. I'm going to talk about this in a second. I think if you look at the individual perspective, the excellent cultural painful frameworks pale into insignificance. It's a bit dramatic, I understand, but I hope you get my point. So there are 5 challenges of this book. Yeah, I think we should look at intercultural processes and encounters without this heavy veneer of these extant kind of frameworks. Yeah, we need to break away from this homo-economic approaches in intercultural business education. Yeah, perhaps I let that sink in for a second. I think we should instead focus on the mental process of intercultural encounters. And, looking at the new crop of students, I think we should let students draw and learn from their own experiences. I don't have all the answers. If it's an individual kind of phenomenon, which I firmly believe it is, I don't have the answers. We need to involve the students to find the answers for them. And it also, finally, another challenge, of course, is to strengthen communication skills, yeah? So they can create rapport, can create appreciation and a climate of trust and openness. So the book has 3 principal aims in this complex, fast-paced, interconnected world, environment. I think we can all agree that, we quickly reach our limits to our ability to interact well with others become, quickly obvious. Yeah, we automatically reach this point where if this was not in my own culture, this would be much smoother. It would be much more elegant in the way I communicate. So I think we need to deepen the appreciation of the complexities. We must move beyond the frameworks of high context, low context, or power distance, or whatever you have here, communitarianism. We need to really deepen this appreciation and widen understanding what intercultural do to us and what we make of them. And I think this is important and dear to all of us to appreciate that language is much more than exchanging information. Yeah, language really is the key, as it were, to make these relationship building happen. A quick overview. I don't want to, looking at the time, I don't want to go into too much detail here, but each of these frameworks, looking at Kluckhohn's brought back 1960s, Hall's work, Hofstadter's work in the 1970s, 1980s, they were asking questions that were right for the time. Yeah, 1950s cultural difference is quite irrelevant. Yeah, there was just one way of doing things. That's a very strong US centrism, as it were. We moved from the irrelevance to the country level of the 1960s and 1970s, perhaps to the company level in the 1980s, group level. I'm looking now, of course, at Trompanar's work, or individual level in the 2000s when we look at Schwartz's works. And more recently, and this group is doing so much for that, we're looking at how we can organize tasks. So for me, the great narrative really is, we become more and more fine-grained in looking at cultural differences in management research over the last, 70 years or so. So I think the time is just right, to look at, at the really individual, perhaps even psychological level, looking inside us. What do intercultural encounters do to us as persons? So this is the idea of this slide, really. Yeah. Here are some additional, everybody, I don't want to be too grandiose about it, looking at the iceberg model or the onion model, as it were, that kind of thing. But I like to compare intercultural encounters or intercultural competence, as it were, with a tree. If we all agree that intercultural encounters, intercultural competence is an individual phenomenon which we cannot explain using these kind of external framework, it's firmly set at the individual level. We need to look at these kind of factors, at our roots. Yeah. You need to look at our parents and peers, how we've been growing up. They gave us the values. Where are values where do they transcend? Well, at home, in our family, reference groups, friends, that kind of thing. Our experiences come from institutions, the media, school, and perhaps experiences we have, with otherness. Surely, all of in this group, we're now 27 in this group, we all have different experiences with otherness based on our biography. Yeah, perhaps there was somebody within us or within this group has been living in many different kind of places when they were young. Or there must be perhaps a student in this group who has been growing up bilingually. He or she has a very different kind of perspective of otherness than people who have been just living in Austria for the most time of their life. Yeah, so these are the roots. Then we have the core, the Stamm, as it were. The knowledge and skills. We grow these rings, as it were. Once we get older, that gives us our statelessness in intercultural exchanges. It's our approach to otherness, as it were, our internal readiness. We are quite stable in the way based on our roots and our experiences. We've grown to experiences, grown behavior of how we react if we meet people from other cultures. And then we have this kind of surface thing, the growth of flexibility, our relationships, actual skills. I quite like this idea of the crown of the tree, which is, exposed to all these kind of, wind and sun and whatever you have you, yeah. This is how we actually communicate if we deal with other people. I see in this the communication part, Philippe, as it were, the visible behavior, perhaps, and communications others can see, but it's really hard to decode, of course. So this is my intercultural competence model, which I'm presenting in this book. Yeah, you're going to see in a couple of minutes the overview of the book. Looking at where these roots are coming from, where we gain our experiences, and how we actually behave. So the textbook, it is a textbook, wants to encourage readers to take responsibility for the lifelong learning, and development. It's just an invitation. I need to make this clear, to engage with intercultural themes. I don't have all the answers. I don't, but I invite the readers to take responsibility for their learning. It makes clear that we all, based on the tree analogy, if you will, that it wants to connect with these readers' experiences, like a drawer, of a cupboard. We all have this kind of experience with others. So perhaps, we have experiences, and it offers freedom and independence within the learning process. So you can skim through each of the chapter and look at what is perhaps most appealing to you, what attracts you most. And it's not a book which you can read from the first page to the last page. It's set up in different kind of chapters, of course, and you can digest whatever looks most tasty, perhaps, to you. It values rich relationship between us and others, the humanistic perspective, of course, and it wants readers reflect on their own values, and they develop a sense of responsibility for inclusivity and diversity. It's a book the book has many exercises set up to apply the concept I'm talking about, of course, but also think about what these experiences did to them. This is the second part. And the third exercises are much more, so it's a reflectivity, trying things out, reflectivity, but also trying things out in the sense of group activities, that kind of thing. So I hope it is written in a way that is engaging, inspiring, and has a lot of these kind of supporting learning features. I'm looking at affections, emotions, thinking, cognitive, and behavioral aspects of intercultural leadership. This is how the book is being set up. And instead of isolating this kind of variation as something unchanging or universal phenomenon, I hope it brings about impulses for more meaningful studies of intercultural behavior, because it is set at the individual level. I'm not sure whether I'm able to predict any kind of behavior, but it certainly gives you an idea of why you behave the way you do when you engage with people of different kind of cultural backgrounds, and of course of that of others. Yeah. Well, I call it merge and application of behavioral basics, psychology and communication theory to intercultural scenarios. So yes, I'm looking at emotions. I'm looking at the theory of motivations. I'm looking at attitudes. So I merge that kind of idea of neo-behaviorism with communication studies. I'm going to talk about this in a second, how this really works. And there are, of course, plenty of opportunities to reflect, explore, and apply these insights to intercultural leadership repertoire. Looking at, no, let's dig a little bit deeper how I came about the idea of how the book is structured. It has about 500 pages, 550-ish, yeah. I realized, yeah, that we first need to understand that there are differences. If there are no differences, yeah, intercultural issues don't matter. It's as simple as that, at least for me. Yeah, I'm looking at the individual. Yeah, so I first need to understand that there's something unfamiliar to trigger all the responses in us, the mental processes within the organism, and how we actually behave. So there are 3 steps really to the book. First, I'm looking at sensing the differences. Is something that we experience, is that subtle or blatant? Is that a culture bump? Something we stumble over that is unexplainable to us. Then, once we have that, we stumble over, oh, this person or that person does not behave as I expected him or her to do. I need to, then our mental processes start to kick in. We start to give meaning to these kind of differences. How do these cultural differences affect us? And based on that, so we sense these differences, we gave meaning to these differences, and then we show behavior, we adjust to these kind of differences, how we communicate with other people. So it's much more than, oh, let's look at communication. There are a whole set of, variables going on before we actually start communicating. Quick definition of culture bounds. Yeah, describe culture, Arthur Nicholson, as a phenomenon that occurs when individuals have expectations about another person's behavior within a particular situation, but encounters a different behavior in that situation when interacting with an individual from a different culture. So something is unfamiliar. Yeah, we are pushed out of our comfort zone because people do no longer behave as we expect them to do, in whatever form and format. Yeah, I call this in this book, we have this kind of loss of superpower of making cultural sense. We have this intuitive within our culture. We do not need to think a lot about how other people behave because we have the superpower of making sense of how other people behave within our own culture inhabitant. And this is important. We tend to think about culture differences as something negative. We tend to think it pushes us out of our comfort zone, and this is something bad, that we need to deal with, get control over, that it is something chaotic, that kind of thing in the more extreme cases. But I think there's also, in any kind of intercultural encounter, there might as well be very positive things, which we tend to forget in all these discussions about intercultural differences or intercultural research. Yeah, some people are really excited to meet people from France. If I'm meeting Philippe, I'm really excited to talk to him. Yeah, there's absolutely something positive. if I'm in Japan, for instance, isn't that fantastic? So we get carried away of something that it is something negative, but I believe that there is something negative and positive as well in intercultural encounters. Yeah, and there's this kind of competition between. I have this kind of waves in here. So there is this kind of fear zone. We are put out of our comfort zone. We're entering this kind of fear zone. There is this idea of growth and contact. Yeah. Perhaps we move towards curiosity and respect for other cultures. We appreciate cultural differences, and we are perhaps prepared to learn. So this is future-oriented, but there is this, at the same time, something that is holding us back. You know, this kind of negative emotions, you know, this kind of chaos. We want to reduce this kind of unpleasantness. You know, think about, I don't know about your experiences, but if you've been living a long time abroad, it really feels nice to talk your own mother tongue in the evening to your wife or your spouse. Yeah, meeting friends at you know, from home. You know, connect to home. That's an important part. So all I'm trying to say is, with this particular slide, I don't believe that cultural differences are just about the negative side of things. There are a lot of, you know, positive aspects in the cultural differences as well. Now, we're moving towards the culture balance towards the end of my presentation. Yeah. So this is a really important slide. Actually, let me try to explain to you what I'm doing with this. I see so the culture bump does something to us. Yeah. Okay. If we are not aware of that, we are unconscious of we are not aroused whatsoever. Yeah. But the more severe these culture bumps are, the more agitated and attentive we get to these kind of cultural kind of differences. So I'm talking about arousal now, aren't I? Which then kicks off and triggers all these kind of psychological and kind of mental processes, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But this slide is key in as much that it kicks off how we respond to intercultural differences. Yeah. So the more we arouse, the more we deal with or surprised, unfamiliar, the more chaotic we feel the situation is, the more agitated we get, yeah? To the point that we might even start to panic or resort to kind of ill doing things, you know, drinking alcohol to deal with these problems, whatever it is. Yeah. So the ideal, I think, of having smooth intercultural relationship is to be attentive, somewhere in between. Yeah. Ideally, we are in the middle of the arousal phase. If you try to understand what I'm trying to get here, the better we are prepared to perform in intercultural encounters. Yeah. Our performance recedes or decreases the more aroused we are. So coming back to the stimulus response or organism response kind of paradigm from neo-behaviorism, there is something out there, the stimulus, yeah, the environment, yeah. Perhaps this is the example of an American businessman touches the Asian partner on the shoulder, squeezing him firmly. Yeah, this is what we can observe. And if you look at the right-hand side, what we also observe is his reaction or her reaction. He steps back or she steps back and smiles at him. But there's an awful lot going on between these kind of observable reactions, stimulus, and our reaction. Yeah, there's a lot of unobservable on the American side. American businessman might think, well, I really appreciate this guy's effort. I see him as a friend in body. I want to express my appreciation, and I pat him on the shoulder. And there's also a lot going on within the Asian businessman, as it were. Yeah. So haptic, visual, I think this is all something talking about stimulus. It's not, it's all our stimulus. Yeah. What we hear, smell, sense, whatever it is. Yeah. He's touching me. I see him coming closer. It's a lot of emotions might be involved. Surprise, fear, oh, he's getting too close to me, disgust, perhaps even touching. So I'm clearly outside the horizon of experience and comfort zone. This is perhaps inappropriate, at least in my home culture. You might be thinking, perhaps there's a competing kind of cognition. Shall I restrain my negative feelings because I'd like to maintain contact? So all I'm trying to say here is we observe things, but there's much more going on inside us, kicked off by this kind of arousal. And here's an overview of what I'm doing in this book. Yeah, comes with 17 chapters. I.e., 17 is the conclusion. Yeah. We have the first chapter is looking at the stimuli. Yeah, when we sense these kind of differences. It could be the macro environment, could be the cultural frameworks. I'm debating, or have been debating with friends and colleagues, whether I should leave the frameworks in. I will leave them in. I think it's important to look at them in a more condensed kind of way, with a lot of exercises, because it's a textbook and some might find this useful. So I'm looking at the first 4 chapters, looking at the stimuli, what cultural differences do to us that kick off this kind of arousal. And then I'm looking at the life biographies, looking at involvement, I'm looking at the personal environment, looking at family and friends, perceptual roots. I'm talking about the media, talking about schooling, that kind of thing, whatever might have an influence on how we see otherness. And all this might affect how we are activated by cross-cultural encounters. So I'm looking at chapter by chapter, looking at intercultural encounters and activation, intercultural encounters and motivation, emotion. More and more, I'm diving from the pure emotional kind of facets to the more cognitive kind of aspects of attitudes and learning. That is what's happening in chapter 7 to 13. So, and then I'm going to the last chapters, 14 to 16, are looking at how we actually deal with these differences. Again, the observable behavior, how aware and mindful people are, how we create trust. And I call this also face work. From Goffman, I use his work to look at how we communicate with other people. So this is, in a nutshell, or giving you an overview of what happens in this book. Each chapter starts with a short story, like an opening vignette, that introduces the students to the chapter, what they will cover. It ends with critical thinking questions at the end of each of these opening vignettes, just to get the students thinking about these issues. Yeah. There are so-called, I call it triads, so exercises illustrating the concept covered. Yeah. And I hope that they will make the students curious about what they learned about cross-cultural, for instance, cross-cultural emotions or motivations, cross-cultural settings, that for instance. Yeah. So you have here an example of a picture from the 1979 magazine California Today, a Japanese being depicted 50 years ago, and you can discuss these issues with your students. I invite students to self-reflect, like introspection, I think is important for intercultural growth. So there will be plenty of opportunities in each chapter to reflect, explore, and apply these insights to the intercultural leadership repertoire. Then I have students do things as well. Yeah. So I have students, activities really. For instance, here we have an invitation to hone their communication skills, to listen to other people, for instance. Communication models. This is also a factor of this book. Each chapter ends with a humanistic communication model, be it from Buber and Bohm, be it Virginia Satir, these kind of perhaps well-known or pioneers in humanistic communication studies. I explain what their thinking was, I explain the models after each chapter. It's applied to this chapter, and then I have students do it and try to use their frameworks for intercultural scenarios. So here we have Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, for instance, different kind of steps of how to give feedback, for instance, so people can learn how to give feedback in an intercultural kind of setting. So you have these kind of settings or these kind of frameworks at the end of each chapter. End of chapter summaries, of course, you have that. The book also has online materials, video vignettes are being produced as in the next couple of months. Perhaps not perhaps, but there will be also interviews with practitioners, real life insights from practitioners of how they see leadership, and there will be also currently I'm working on online resources for instructors, supplements such as PPTs. There are a lot of like role-play exercises, which you have instructions for. This is a great thing. I wanted to share this with you. This is perhaps the almost final thought. Yeah. I started today with this quick look at, who am I? And I'm a keen cook. I have found that, looking at cultural differences of culture, students love cooking. So I have students actually cook dishes from all different parts of the world of food. So here we have China, of course, biang noodles. I don't know whether you know that. So they get like cooking instructions. They go out to the supermarket and buy the ingredients. Cook it in groups, and then in the next day we discuss what they learned about Chinese culture through Chinese cooking. I think this is it's also an exercise in the book. Just in time, 5 o'clock, I was asked to talk for about 60 minutes. The book will come out in August. That's the latest I hear. I'm currently in the stage of polishing, editing my work. It will be available from UTB. You can order it online. It will be about 35 euros. It will be also available as an ebook. I thank you for your attention. I think there's a lot of things to talk about. Now we have about 30 minutes to discuss. But before that, I would like to, this is also, I think Philip started off with a reminder that we're going to Warsaw. Just again, from my side, also a general reminder that we're going to meet in May in Poland. Thank you so much for your time and space, Philip, to give me the space today to talk about my book. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Sierk, for this stimulating and very rich presentation of your book. Maybe I could have some questions to start the discussion about your presentation. The first question would be, which civilization is better placed to address this call of the humanistic perspective? You as an expert of Asian culture, would you say that Asian culture are better placed than Western culture based on logos and rationality to address this question?
I don't want to distinguish between East and West, Philip. Here. I think that I need to get hold on. This is better. I hear an echo. Okay. I think it's. I genuinely believe, that we all have, Philip, the skills in us to be appreciative and mindful of others. I strongly believe in that. I don't want to distinguish between East and West. They might have a slight advantage of being, more high context or whatever you'd like, however you'd like to put it. But I genuinely believe, that we all have this innate power to learn. That's what I want to say to you about this.
Okay, thank you. And the second one. is more about research. I liked your slide about the evolution of the research topic in cross-cultural management. Do you think that current orientation in cross-cultural management meet your expectations with regards on this humanistic perspective, and which ones? You spoke about positivist and interpretivist streams of research. In the interpretivist stream of research, we can also find substreams. What is your feeling about current orientation of research?
I think, thank you, Philip, for this important question. I can only talk about, how intercultural management is taught in business schools. Let's start from that perspective, perhaps. And I firmly believe that we are, because it's set in business school, they have to be positivistic. It's such a nice fit, to talk about Hofstede and Globe and so forth to the clients we have in business schools. But I think we should move beyond that and look at the individual, although it might be painful for some of our colleagues and perhaps also students. The same might be true for research in that sense, Philip. If you look at the research in IB, and we're all familiar with that, it's number crunching, isn't it? We just put in some numbers from Hofstede and think we can make any kind of predictions based on their work. I think we're looking into the wrong direction here. We need to look at more individuals. What does culture differences do to us as individuals? I hope this answers your question, Philip.
Okay, thank you very much. We have one question by Christina. Christina, you are mute. I think you are mute.
Can't hear you. No?
Christina is mute.
Perhaps you write your question into the chat, Christina?
So Peter, maybe?
Thank you very much, Sierk, for your interesting presentation. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciated that you pointed out the limitations and even the risks and dangers of a country level approach to intercultural management, intercultural leadership. I really am beginning to wonder, or have been beginning to wonder, as a result in particular of my not my academic hat, but my practitioner's hat, my trainer's hat, been wondering exactly how much culture actually intercultural development needs. Intercultural management development needs, and I think probably you're right to point out its limitations. Very interesting aspects that you take, and I just want to come to the title of your book, Intercultural Leadership. I mean, as I get it, your book is aimed mainly at bachelor students, and leadership is quite a long way off for bachelor students. Maybe in 10 years or so, their early 30s, perhaps they'll be leading a small group or so. So what's your conceptualization of leadership? How do you conceptualize leadership in your book?
Yes,
That was my question.
Peter, thank you for that issue. It was, I'm aware of that, of these issues of who's the target group of this book. Yes, you could say that it is targeted at bachelor students, at least in the sense of how it is written. Okay, I took a lot of care of writing it in a way that is very digestible and understandable. So it's written, I'm using like readable, these kind of scores, and it should be able to be understood by 16 to 17-year-olds. This doesn't mean, however, that the book should only be read by 17, 18, 20-year-olds. I think the book could be equally, because it's much more, it's a call to self-exploration, Peter, isn't it? Yeah, that's what it is. And I think all of us can do with exploring what intercultural encounters do to us. So leadership for me is communication. I made the point earlier. And hence I have a very strong focus of this humanistic kind of communication model at the end of each chapter, which asks us, to hone our communication skills, hone our communication leadership skills, as it were. Yeah, as I showed, how to give good feedback, for instance, how to use the theory use is perhaps you are aware of Otto Scharmer's work. You know, how can we use his work to become better listeners, for instance? So it's also a call to arms, not only to younger students, but I think it's open. Yeah, that many students of life can use it. In terms of leadership, I answered that. I think leadership for me is communication. Leadership is also something that emerges from the situation and the person, and this is clearly where this book is set out, looking at, you know, the stimulus response kind of paradigm I'm using, or at least as a backbone of this book. Yeah, I hope this is satisfying, or the answer is satisfying to you. Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. But I'm aware of this issue of leadership, and I'm looking at this particularly at the beginning of the book in the introduction, where I make this point very, very clear. Yeah, I hope I made it clear. That is. Christina.
So I can tell you what Christina wrote. Thank you for your interesting presentation. I think this book could become good additional reading for one of my modules. You seem to focus on biographies and individualism. Mm-hmm. I wondered how do you approach intersectionality? So a question on intersectionality.
Now, the problem, I really appreciate your feedback, Christina. Thank you so much. But could you perhaps quickly explain to me exactly what you? It's difficult now to interact with writing. What is intersectionality to you? I just that I can give you a good answer. I don't understand the terminology, I'm afraid. No, we can't hear you.
I don't know if Christina
perhaps. Perhaps, Christina, we can have a chat after. Yeah, I think then we can arrange, and I'm sure I'm able to explain my thinking about intersectionality. If you explain to me what it is, I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay. Was that a question, Christina?
Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Excellent.
So
perhaps to Christina, yes,
Alexei.
Alexei,
please.
Dear Sierk, thank you very much for very interesting presentation. So I was happy to be 2 times in Munich. I was a student. I had a praxis during a month, not a long time, but I visited Pinakothek for 3 times. Yes, so old Pinakothek, new Pinakothek, and 1 time Pinakothek der Moderne. And in this case, I have to ask you, if you're so kind, please tell us 2 beautiful pictures opposite to you. What is pictures are, and so what kind of inspiration from these pictures was in your book?
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, these are from my time in England. This is not from Pinakothek. I wish they were from the Pinakothek, but they were. It's a cup of a mill owner. Yeah, from Yorkshire. They were painted in 1840, around that time, apparently by somebody from Italy. I don't know about inspiration. I just, I like this kind of air they give me. Alexei, thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Vera Dickman, nice to see you, Vera. You have a question, please.
Hello, nice to be with you again. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for the really interesting presentation, because I think firstly it's very, very important to update the information we have and the examples we have of people from different cultures today with the newer generations and interactions. and also look at the lives of our students around us, as you say, with the cooking and so on. My question has to do with, you introduced the word culture bump.
Yeah.
And I guess in the past, we always used, or we sometimes do use that word critical incident or cultural incident, which you're using as culture bump. I like the way that you describe how it makes us think and react. But you speak about the importance of building relationships. I think that's the expression that you used. And I think that I've always considered it, and you do bring that word in, as trust building in general, like what interferes with trust building. And even if we don't study all the dimensions of Hofstede and others with every group, because it depends how much time we have, et cetera, and we can't, and not everybody can handle the trompenaars and all that. The question is, they've got to understand that certain behavioral contradictions or differences, if you like, they can lead to breakdown in trust. And when you give the example of the American businessman and tapping on the shoulder and everything, it's like, where is there a risk of the trust breaking down, people feeling insulted or misunderstood and so on? And so it's important to point out that there are certain dimensions, you know, or that differences that have been recognized and spoken about. But somewhere, the main thing is to not break down the trust, to not withdraw and to not break down the trust. Is this equivalent to building a relationship? What you're saying is the importance is to build a relationship.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my question, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. Thank you very much. It's an important question because ultimately it asks, you know, for me, do we need these models? And I think yes, we still do need them because they, in a way, if you look at the perceptual roots I'm talking about in this book, you know, where these influences come from, you know, where are they being instituted and these kind of things. Yes, they do still matter, but I think we need to approach and use them in a different kind of way. Instead of looking at make the students think about them as differences, you know, oh, there is a difference and I need to be watchful of those. Think about them more in a kind of relationship possibility. That would be my answer number one. And the second answer, we must not, however, underestimate I think in today's time and age, very few cultural differences are very blatant. You understand what I'm trying to say? You know, that there's, because we expect, this is the point I tried to make earlier there. You know, we are all being trained in intercultural management. The majority of business schools have these kind of modules. So we know that some cultures, you know, tend to be laissez-faire about timekeeping, that kind of thing, and others. We know, and hence, you know, cultural differences are far less blatant in today's time and age. They're much more subtle. Yeah. So and for that, I think we need to be much more careful about where these differences come from, because I believe that trust building, how to say that? My train of thought is running away now. Is that, you know, trust building does not come from these blatant kind of differences, but more from these subtle ones. Yeah, subtle communication hints, subtleties, that kind of thing. And as I said, culture is just the tip of the iceberg of these things. You know, if I'm negotiating with somebody from China, I can expect that there are cultural differences. You know, yes, of course, I'm aware of that, but I'm going to bring me as a person into the situation. So I should be also looking at all these facets. Hence, I'm going back to Philippe's point about we need to be much more particularist than universalist. I'm not sure whether I'm able to answer your question. I think we need to have both sides of the coin there.
I think I liked your idea, what you said, that the aim is actually not so much to focus on the differences, but to question how we can build relationships and where we can avoid perhaps also giving offense. which breaks down trust. And so for that reason, people have to be sensitive somehow to have to be sensitive. And you're right about developing our own sensitivities and growth and wondering where this all comes from. But thank you. That was a very nice, your approach is very detailed and accessible.
I think just to add on to that, hence I'm using this kind of humanistic communication theories at the end of each chapter, where students then can train to be more appreciative.
Ah, okay.
Much more, that they start to understand the importance of listening, for instance, start thinking about how to give feedback. All these wonderful things we learn from the likes of Václavík or, Virginia Satir and these kind of people. Yeah. Again, I have to be careful here. It's just an invitation. I can't, some people might think this is not for me, fine, but I strongly believe in that we need to think about what humanistic thinkers can help us do with intercultural encounters.
That's really great. Yeah, thanks. I think, Philippe, maybe did you mean that the Asians are often more exposed to the West and Western ways of thinking and Western through movies and so on than we have been to different aspects of Asia, and therefore they're a step ahead? Were you thinking along those lines?
No, I was thinking of the relationship orientation of Indian people, for example, and Asian people in general. That makes me think of another aspect of Sierk's presentation about values. Values are not always positive for establishing rapport. Not always. Can you expand on this, Sierk?
I think, yes, values are an important aspect, aren't they? Yeah. But I like, in my book, I talk about values more about looking at attitudes. Yeah. So there's a whole chapter dedicated to attitudes and the idea of learning and changing, how we change this attitudes. I'm looking at these kind of aspects, but there's values I have not much looked at, I think, in this book, Philip, I'm afraid. Yeah, it's looking at more from this kind of process of emotions, motivations, attitudes, and learning, that kind of thing. Values don't really feature in this book, I have to say. Perhaps I should add a chapter.
Thank you. Do you have other questions? I don't see. Sheila, yeah. Sheila, please.
Hello. Yeah, Sierk, I was just curious, your focus on the humanistic approach and the way you describe your approach. Did you consider giving the book at any point a different title? Because you still, the title still carries this intercultural leadership in it. Did you consider a different title?
No. The short answer is no. I appreciate the feedback, but it's also not only in my hands, but also in the way of how it is marketed. So it's in the hands also of the publisher as it is, and it's already in the marketing kind of process and all that. So it's a bit. I appreciate the feedback in terms of that I need to be more careful in terms of leadership, but I think I made the point in the introduction quite well of why it should carry the title.
Yeah, I wasn't really thinking so much of the leadership element as the intercultural element.
All right, okay. Can you explain this to me, Sheila?
Not really. I was wondering if you maybe had ideas on that. It's just that on the one hand, you suggest that we need to move away from this group approach that you can observe with people like Hofstede and Pompenars. On the other hand, I feel that also Schwartz at least was moving more in the direction of the individual values. And I know that you have worked on Schwartz and his values. That's why I was a little bit surprised to hear just now that you said that values are not necessarily addressed in great detail in the book. But nevertheless, I was thinking more of this idea of intercultural, that when you have a very individual focus.
Thank you, Sheila. Values are addressed when I look at Schwartz's work, of course, so they do appear, but they do not appear in the process of, I look at where values come from, but I do not look at that in much more detail later when I look at the processes of what happens within us. Yeah, that perhaps so much to values. I think interculturality still does matter, and it's important to have that in the title, Sheila. Because and talk about this intercultural encounters as culture bumps, as it were. So I think it's something that is unfamiliar for us, triggers all these processes. The whole book is also set up, if you look at the communication models at the end of each chapter, they address specifically or apply their thinking to intercultural scenarios. Yeah. Hence, I think it's important to have intercultural in the title sheet. But thank you for the
thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your contributions.
Yeah.
I have a comment from Mai Lin Tran. Thank you very much for the presentation, Professor Horn. Congratulations on the publishing of your new book. Looking forward to actually reading it in August. I have to bid goodbye now, etc.
Can we have
other question?
Yeah.
Yeah, Tao Kao.
Hi, Sierk. A question when I'm thinking when I'm actually teaching students. I'm currently in Canada, you probably know that, and we actually has a large immigration, picking up refugee or asylum seeker from the last few years around the world. And you quickly see people adapt to the new cultures. They're picking up different things here. They're picking up what they assume to be Canadian cultures. And so we see people display a duality or even different type of culture when they are interacting with different group of people, even in a single settings. That probably make a lot of your thoughts, really relevant, because we need to thinking about individual, but it's also become really difficult to how to analyze the situation or even teach students how to handling with the cultural difference or whatever other things is in there. And I totally agree with you. Cultural difference shouldn't be a negativity in terms of thinking. It could be a strength, because if we are able to combine people's strengths in different cultures, that's great. But more and more I see you couldn't really pin down people, particularly they are immigrants or the second generations of immigrations, say you are from particular cultures, and so that the analysis become really messy. Just wondering your thoughts.
Well, that's just exactly my point, Paul. Thank you for raising this again. That we need to move beyond this kind of cultural group kind of national boundaries kind of thing. You have people, second generation, people living in Germany, third generation, that kind of thing. As you say, it's really, really messy. Yeah. The point, I think I try to bring these two strands together again. Yeah, Paul, thank you for raising this. I don't have the answers. Yeah, I can only show the processes. I looked at them and I've thought about this quite a lot actually. Yeah, at the processes, and if we make these kind of processes more transparent, intermixed with these kind of communication application kind of activities I intersperse throughout the book, I think that helped the students come to their own solutions. That's the point I'm trying to make, perhaps. I don't have the answers, but let's think about these things together with the students, because I want to meet them at eye level.
Agree. Thanks for the comments.
Okay.
Thank you. Now, Sheila, Scott, please.
We can, of course, discuss this at work, but nevertheless, I'd like to just raise the point again. You've stressed that you don't have the answers. Presumably, we don't have the answers. How, and the fact that the book is appropriate for use in a business school with business students, not only, but amongst other things. As you know, of course, we also have to evaluate these students. And in view of the fact that there may be no right or wrong answers to these situations, presumably a good answer is a solution that works for the individual in that individual situation. But I'm just curious whether you've also thought about evaluation.
Absolutely, Sheila. I think you raised a very important issue. Guys, Sheila and I work very closely together in Munich, of course. So these debates we often have, haven't we, Sheila? I fully appreciate it's a matter of at what kind of level we pitch this kind of thinking. I think hence I kept this idea of the Hofstadters and so forth in the book because it's very how do you say, very straightforward. This is how things are, and you need to know these models, as well as, and I have to add this here, you know, think about, you know, what are attitudes in intercultural encounters? What is motivation in intercultural encounters? So there is this aspect of knowledge building, as it were, which clearly can be tested in one form or the other. But then again, I think if we have students, this new crop of students I'm talking about, they struggle with this kind of teaching, I think, oftentimes, of just being on the receiving end. They like to think about these issues themselves. So I think it would be perhaps good as kind of open kind of questions and self-reflectivity, which could be assessed and how, you know, how self-reflective students really are. This is how I could see. So it's serving both ends in a way, doesn't it, Sheila?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we certainly have different kinds of students and different groups of students, and they actually live this intercultural communication. That's very much part of their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we need both sides. I think they need to understand the basic concepts, but I also like them to think more creatively in a sense. Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Thanks. Vera, again, for another question.
No, actually, it's not really another question, but really addressing Sheila's question and just the question of evaluation. I agree, it's really important. And I mean, because what are we able at the end of a course, you know, what can we observe in terms of what they're taking away and what they've understood? And I've always believed in the students enacting their outcomes, their learning outcomes. So I've always had them act out through sketches or scenarios and so on, some critical incidents or what you're calling cultural bumps, you know, of their own, and having them resolve them. And now for business school, where I've been teaching online as well, to get them to also invent a project in groups where they are diverse enough to do so, and to identify critical incidents and act out the resolution. We'll see what comes of it. But for me, unless they're using their bodies completely, unless they are, I saw that towards the end, Sierk, you've brought in non-verbal communication and so on. For me, unless they are not, unless they are wholly involved and they're taking risks themselves, they're not going to take in the information in the same way. So I just throw them in. I think they have to get wet, they have to swim. They have to get out the other side, and we have to see it. That's the way I've always believed that, you know, in handling these evaluations, because it's otherwise really, really difficult. Anyway, that's just, you know, I just wanted to contribute that.
Thank you, Vera. I love your analogy with swimming. I like that. Thank you.
So thank you. I think we are going to an end. Again, dear Sierk, thank you for this wonderful presentation. And thanks to everyone for the stimulating questions and comments. Do you want, Madeleine, do you want to say something as a concluding word?
Yeah, well, from my
Anyway,
side, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for the presentation, Sierk. So this was like the kickoff for the book presentations. So maybe we can have some more future book presentations. Would be very, very stimulating and helpful, I think, like for discussion and also to know what's new in the field. So thanks a lot for your presentation. I hope everyone enjoyed it. We actually posted some links at the beginning of the webinar about our GEM&L conference this year. So if you haven't heard it so far, we're having our annual conference in Warsaw this year, May 22 to 24th. And you'll find the link as well, or let's say the description of the conference on our homepage.
Yeah, and thank you, Sierk, for mentioning this conference of GEM&L this year in Poland. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for your input. The great discussion. I really appreciate all your input. I still have time to work on the issues you raised. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Greetings and good luck with your publication. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you. Thank you.
Bye.
Have a nice afternoon, day, night, wherever you are. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Philippe, for having me on board.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.